on the episode today. We talk so much about all these new models coming out. Claude 4 is coming out. GPT-5 is probably coming out in the next couple of months. The new Grok is coming out. We were talking about DeepSeek the other day coming out. And I wanted to talk about today because Jaeden and I actually use different types of models, right? And my guy, Robert Haslam, sort of like, he loves Gemini. I love Claude and ChatGPT. Jaeden loves Grok. He's gotten me sort of like into Grok. So how do you test these models against each other? And I bring it up because the thing that I'm using a ton now is Jaden's actual product, right? So Jaeden is actually a software developer. You wouldn't know that to look at him because he looks like such a goofball. But the truth is he has this incredible product, which is called AI Box. And it's aibox.ai, which is pretty awesome. But what this does is it allows you to $20 a month. You get access to all these models, which would probably, and it does. It saves me about $180 a month because I actually subscribe to all these products. But it allows you to compare outputs on all these things. $20 a month. You have Claude, you have Gemini, you have Grok, you have ChatGPT, you have all these things, and you can tell yourself. You can tell for yourself, like, what's the better writer? Is Claude the better writer than ChatGPT? Is Gemini the better for data analysis? Is Grok going to give you the better answers? It's an absolutely incredible tool. It's absolutely blown up, which is really, really cool. So just wanted to plug that for Jaeden really quick because it's a really cool thing. But Jaeden, what I want to do in this episode is help people understand which large language models do you use for what have you discovered, because you are one of the power users of all this stuff. Like, why Grok, Gemini, why, and people that what do they use and why do they use them?
Yeah, 100%. And I want to get some of your takes too. I'll say this week, what I have been using a lot for Grok specifically, I find it's really good. And I know this sounds probably crazy to a lot of people. Grok, I found, is really good with legal advice. I've been using it a lot for lately. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous that I have to do this, but legal advice, accounting, taxes, all of the things that I feel like are like more, I don't know, like if you'd say sensitive, but like, I don't know, those types of things, I really find Grok is quite good at it. I think maybe part of it is because it has the data set of Twitter, and so it kind of is like plugged into a lot of people talking about like economics and like that kind of stuff, like politics and economics is so popular on X that I think it pulls in a lot of that data. So it's actually really good when you ask it about, you're like, hey, like I live in, so recently with my taxes, I was like, hey, I live in, Arizona, and this is my tax situation. This is how much I'm making from different things. What are common tax write-offs? What are ways I can, lower my tax burden legally, right? Like all this kind of stuff. I feel like other models are a lot more squirrely and have a lot more like, they'll be like, well, I'm not a financial advisor and I wouldn't recommend, and like Grok, it'll tell me something. I'm like, okay, but like, let's say I like do this. Could I technically do that? Is that like technically illegal? And it's like, technically you could do X, Y, Z, whatever. So it's much more creative. And I do love that about Grok. And then with legal stuff, I've been blown away. I just recently had a big thing that was an unfortunate situation that required some legal help. And it was incredibly useful and saved me so much money on lawyers. I've spent more money than I would have ever cared to on lawyers in my life on other legal disputes. And so had a new one come up and completely solved it. Like, I can't really say what it is, but 100% resolved with Grok, without any sort of fees and without any adverse reaction to myself. So that was really, really cool for me.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, again, and I'm not trying to sort of like plug AI, but I would, because I love Jaeden, but it really is actually unbelievably useful. So what I tend to do is I'm just like, well, I'm already on Claude. So I often compare like Claude and ChatGPT in terms of like a writing thing. Then I'll dip into Gemini. Obviously, if you have Copilot, you'll use that. But then I got to say, when I go into Grok, it's that lack of guardrails, which I actually really like. And Grok is nothing like Elon promised Grok would be. And I think in a good way. He was sort of saying like, oh, it's going to be politically incorrect. It's going to be snarky. No, it's not. It's none of those things, right? It's just like super helpful. It doesn't, again, as Jaeden says, like I ask it tax things, legal things all the time, and it doesn't give all those disclaimers. It's like, well, you're really, I'm like, just tell me and let me make the decision as an adult, right? I think that is really fair. Now, I'm all for guardrails and everything else, but what I like about a system like AI Box, and I think it's the best one out there, is that you can sort of see it like right in the same window. You can start comparing these things. And for me, that's become really handy, besides saving tons of money because it's $20 a month. But more importantly, what have I seen in the differences? So I'll just sort of say, like, I love ChatGPT, right? I kind of use it as my go-to answer anything kind of thing. But what about 4.0 versus the reasoning model O3. So for me, what I find is, first of all, 4.0 is just better when you just have questions, right? It just answers it super fast. People are like, oh, it's not as good as O3. I think it actually is in most things. O3 I use if I'm wishing I had like a McKinsey consultant by my side, right? So if I'm helping an organization with like, pricing models or like really figuring out deep things about agents, I use O3 because it really considers it. It really goes deep. But then what I find, Jaeden, is that it's so nerdy. Like O3, I have to stop it from sort of like answering me in like this highly technical language. And so I often go back to 4.0 just because it talks to me like a normal person. It also drives me over to Claude a lot because Claude is by far the best writer, I think. And then again, and Gemini, I find actually has a great tone of voice. I just find that Gemini, I don't know, it's like it's a bit much sometimes, right? It's sort of like it over provides so much information, all that kind of stuff. And this is where I've been surprised by Grok when I remember to use it. But this is why, again, why AI box is sort of like handy because I just have Grok like preloaded in there. But it's one of these things where you just like, when you see the answer, you're like, that's the answer I want. Because guys, we want to be moving fast on this. Reasoning models are great, but when it slows you down even just like a half second, it's sort of like that latency when you're used to sort of like your Instagram loading in 2 seconds, and when it takes a long time, you get like really frustrated. This is the thing, like reasoning models cause that frustration for me, whereas I'd rather this quick models, and Grok and Gemini are blindingly fast. But Jaeden, do you have like different use cases for different models, like when you're
Yeah.
either writing or creating something? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my, like, I'll be honest, ChatGPT, one of my favorite use cases is their image generation inside of it.
Yeah.
Of course, we know they're going to be coming in hot with the video generation. Is going to be really cool too. But yeah, like it's kind of went from ChatGPT was my like place that I would have all my conversations with, and all of a sudden now it's like I use it for all my creative assets that I generate, which is I think a really interesting shift for me personally, and I'm sure other people might be different. Grok is the place I will go for like financial, legal, just like it's almost like there's like a flavor of like the questions you would ask Reddit is kind of what I'm asking Grok, to be honest. It's kind of like a Reddit AI model, which Reddit should come out with their own AI model. So I hope that they do that, but I haven't seen it come out yet. Right now, I think they're just licensing to Gemini and some other players.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Claude has a really good tone. When you talk about writing, you mentioned this a lot. I'm using Claude when sometimes like ChatGPT will come out with something and I'm like, and so we actually recently did a whole episode where we talked about the software developer that reverse engineered. He essentially reverse engineers AI models' outputs and stems them back to kind of where they got their data from.
Yeah.
And so he found that DeepSeek was getting a lot of its data in the past from OpenAI and more recently from Google Gemini, just based off of like the responses that it was outputting. But one thing that you'll notice is that every AI model kind of talks different. It uses different words, different phrases, and Claude, for whatever reason, is really good with tone. And of course, it's also really good for code. So if I'm doing, or if we're doing anything over at AI Box, my company, for coding, all of our developers are using Claude and are using Claude Code, and just find it works so much better. It's crazy. And I feel bad for all the other AI models. Every time they come up with a big update, like usually whatever AI company does the newest update, whether that's OpenAI or Google or Anthropic, like whatever the biggest update is, it's like that model's now the best at everything for a while till someone else comes out with an update. They'll come up with an update and Claude is still better at code with whatever their older model is. So I think for code, Claude also takes the cake.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, do you use DeepSeek for anything, or is that not one that's a big use for you?
I use it to test, but I also know companies that are starting to use DeepSeek. Like
Okay.
real big companies are starting to use DeepSeek, and because they're looking for an open source model, they're looking for something that's way cheaper. There's something that's evolving very fast, all that sort of stuff. I think there's a little bit of a risk in using DeepSeek, but it's probably the best open source model out there. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's others out there, and what that means is it tends to be like really cheap. You tend to sort of like be able to manipulate it a little better. So there's a lot of things that I test without actually really using. And then the other thing that I use, don't sleep on Perplexity. I think it's funny,
Yes.
like every time we sort of talk about, oh, well, ChatGPT now has, these X posts, Jaeden, right? They're like, just, this is dead. Whatever. Like, I'm like, no, ChatGPT is it's like teachers are dead, or like you'll never use your car again. I'm like, dude, it's so stupid. But like when people are saying like, oh, Perplexity is dead, ChatGPT now has search, and Google has AI mode, and actually, thank God, Claude now has internet. God,
Yeah,
what took you so long? But okay,
finally.
I still love you. But Perplexity, I still use all the time, Jaeden, because I love the interface. You can program what model it uses on the back end. Actually, the Perplexity fine-tuned version is actually really, really good, which is probably the one that they kind of use by default. But I use Claude for my output. And it's it's funny when I ask it something, I rarely manipulate the output. I'm like, that's first shot, no notes on that, which to me is unbelievable. So Perplexity, despite AI mode in Google, despite ChatGPT, despite everything, I'm still using Perplexity a ton.
Conor, do you use any image generation models? And here's the one caveat that I'll say, and probably for a lot of listeners, this is also interesting too. Everyone has different functions that you perform within your organization, and
Yeah.
therefore you're going to use different models. Like some people, when I'm like, hey, like what image model do you use? They're like, image model. Like I have zero use case of ever generating an image ever. Like no image models. I don't use image models. I don't care about them.
That's me for
And
coding.
yeah. And then some people are like, oh, like I just use like text to speech. Like I'm just making audio
Right.
all day long, like
Right.
a lot of audio
Right.
engineers and stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Like people do use like a wide range, but yeah, are you using image models for anything you're doing, or is it more
No,
of
I'm
your
so glad you
team that's
brought that
doing
up.
that?
So my guy Robert is sort of like using all kinds of things, like Ideogram is great, Midjourney is great. But remember how it used to be all Midjourney all the time? I'm not sure I've strayed from the new ChatGPT one, which I don't think it does on mobile, unless I'm wrong. I'm not sure that creates images on mobile like with the latest model. But otherwise, like I had a LinkedIn post the other day, sort of like comparing how World War One, they were using sort of like they're fighting a war in an old way, even with new technology. And sort of I said, hey, create a historical looking
I
image of
was wondering
the
about
tank.
that. I was
First
like,
shot.
that's a really cool picture of a tank that you posted. Like, where did you
That was
get
one
that?
shot. That was one shot. I said, hey, create a World War One soldier standing next to somebody in a World War One tank, the first tank or whatever. And it looked like a historical photo. No notes. It was unbelievable. I was just like really shocked by it.
Do you think that there are risks when making posts like that? Like, I don't know, like what if it was I guess this is the thing with like Google. When Google came out and they were making historical photos and they were like very unhistorically accurate, they were doing all sorts of like crazy things. This is pretty much why you want to have relatively accurate models, I would say. But yeah, the thing that I've found is there's a bunch of really good models. That one, so you said you just one shotted that with ChatGPT then?
100%. And that's the thing. Like, I don't know. I know we're pretty much at time, but yeah, to close us out with that. Like, what models are you using for that? Because for me, ChatGPT is basically one shot and done.
Yeah. So for anyone following along over on Spotify or YouTube, you can see my screen and I'll share a couple examples. But there's three main models that I think I use for a lot. And that is, I really like Flux 1.1 Pro, Ideogram, and then of course, OpenAI is really good. Midjourney is great, but because they never really built an API and they made it really tricky and you kind of had to log in to other platforms or services to use them, I use them a lot less. But I've been really impressed by some of the other models. And so I've been able to generate recently, I just did a LinkedIn influencer traveling to Japan with a bunch of fans. And Flux 1.1 Pro did a great job on generating that image. I was also able to get it to be generated by Ideogram, and
Yeah,
I
that's
was
really good. Wow.
really impressed by the Ideogram output as well. So yeah, it's there's a bunch of different models. I would say try them all out because sometimes you can one shot it like you did with your photo, Conor, and I think that's amazing. And I think for the baseline for most people, if you have ChatGPT, use that. But if you actually are like serious about generating images and you have to do it more than once a week or something, I would try some of these other platforms. Is sometimes they'll get you better outputs, or they'll just get you the outputs faster that you want. So yeah, that's
100%.
been
And
pretty
this is
cool.
again, and Jaeden is doing this on AI Bucks, which is really cool because imagine sort of like a prompt window essentially, and then sort of like tabs as if you might have in Chrome, and Jaeden is switching between the different ones. It's to sort of like show you what they look like in different things. It's very, very cool. Listen, sorry we went a little long today, guys, but we get sort of super passionate about this. Listen, thanks for listening. We love you guys. We love doing this. Have a great rest of your day.